Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag-and-drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to The Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
In just a matter of seconds, you're going to hear a classic episode of this show from back in the day when we called ourselves Movies We Like.
It took us a while to settle into the show's format, so you'll notice some differences as you listen to these episodes. For instance, it takes us a bit of time to actually get into the conversation about the movie. Things like that.
But we're still proud of the conversations about the movies themselves, and we think they're worth keeping in the library.
So enjoy these episodes from our back catalog. And you can become part of our Discord community, learn more about the show, and find out how you can become a supporting member at thenextreel.com.
So thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to The Next Reel. We appreciate your time and attention, and we hope you enjoy the show. It was the first time at this dentist. And I'll tell you, she gave me some not great news, and I still like her afterwards, so that was good.
Wow.
Man, it's going to be some work. Not liking that at all. Gums. It's all about the gums. They're receding. What do you think about that? Terrible.
Receding gum lines, receding hairlines. Like, what is all this?
It makes me feel guilty.
Oh, I'm feeling guilty today.
Segue. Are you feeling guilty? Are you feeling it too?
I woke up feeling guilty today, Pete.
Yes, you did. So we're talking about our guilty pleasures here. We're going to start right in. No teasers here. We're just jumping right in.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. How did we decide who goes first last time we did this?
I think we did them both at the same time. As I recall, we did 1, 2, 3, and then we said them both at the same time.
In hindsight, I think that's a horrible idea.
Well, I think we did it because we didn't want to go, oh, that's even guiltier than I thought. So I'm going to one up him by picking something else.
Oh, that's pretty good. I don't think I'm that sharp. I don't think I could come up with something guiltier after having heard yours.
Yeah.
Mine's guilty enough. I feel terrible about mine. I feel much. What did you do last time?
I did, I think, probably the guiltiest one that we've talked about so far on this show, which was Knowing.
Yeah. I don't remember mine. What was mine? Which
yours
one
was
I feel guilty about all the films.
Eighth Dimension.
Buckaroo Banzai. Yeah.
Buckaroo Banzai.
Yeah. No, and I think I get it this time because I really do feel horrible about this film that I'm about to talk about. I really do. And I didn't feel horrible about the last one. I really enjoyed that film. And I really enjoyed this film, but I feel bad about it. That one I don't feel bad about liking. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
All right. Shall we do this?
All right, let's do it.
All right.
1, 2, 3.
Under the Cherry Moon.
Wow, okay. I'm glad I got the other Purple Rain out of the way.
Now, see, okay, let's talk about this just for a bit. I don't feel bad about liking Purple Rain. I'm a huge Prince fan. I love Prince, and there was a time where Prince's movies were the thing that I was all about and really enjoyed them. And I every time I put Purple Rain on, I really like it. The music's good. There's some interesting visuals. Under the Cherry Moon is 1986 follow-up, which is essentially Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. Prince and his friend are in the Mediterranean, and they're scamming money off of women, and it's like a con thing. It's shot in black and white. It has a terrible IMDb review, and I think it is the lowest. Here it is, Rotten Tomatoes review that I've ever rating that I have ever done, which is coming in at 25%.
Nice.
But I love that he tried some black and white. I love that he's trying some new things. I love a lot of the music. And, we're going to talk about it, man. We are going to talk about it.
Well, at least yours has an audience score on Rotten Tomatoes of 70%. Mine,
that's true.
Volunteers, it's 58% tomato meter, but it's only a 34% audience score, so it's even lower. And I was really struggling trying to find a good guilty pleasure, so I had to dip back into the old Tom Hanks well, because I feel guilty about liking pretty much everything that he's done. And Volunteers, I've just always loved this one. I think that he and John Candy have a great, just always have great chemistry on screen. This has a nice little comedic spin on The Bridge on the River Kwai, but I know it's a pretty bad film. Yet I saw it at an age where I watched it so many times that there's so many quotes in this movie that I say all the time, or I love hearing them. And so, I'm excited about talking about this one, even though I know it's pretty guilty for me.
I think we share the shame this time around, and I love that we picked films that were released like within a year of each other.
I know, completely.
I think that's
unexpected.
Pretty funny. Yeah. So that when are we going to be doing these guilty pleasure shows? Because we got to make sure people don't download those weeks.
Those are going to be right at the end of July, beginning of August. That's when we're going to be doing those two shows. So that should be quite a bit of fun.
Excellent. I'm going to need lots of time.
Yes,
to watch.
Yes, yeah. Indeed. Well, you know what else we need to announce, Pete, along with the fact that we're going to be doing our guilty pleasures at the end of July and the beginning of August, is that we are posting all the rest of the films we're going to be talking about between now and the end of the year. We're going to have that up on Letterboxd, and we'll also throw it up on Facebook. So everyone can now jump on and catch up with all the movies that we're going to be talking about, so they can listen to the shows when they go live.
Outstanding. I love that list. It looks really good.
We've got a lot of fun shows coming up, a fun series, and I'm looking forward to, I think I'm pretty much looking forward to all of these. It's going to be a great rest of the year.
Excellent. All right. Now it's time. Let's tell the people where we're from.
Where are we from, Pete?
Hey, everybody, this is The Next Reel. I'm Pete Wright, and that there's Andy Nelson.
Hey, hey.
And we spoil the movies. Tonight on the show, this is the first in our new series on the work of cinematographer James Wong Howe with W.S. Van Dyke's 1934 film, The Thin Man. But before we get into that, you should learn more about us at thenextreel.com. Subscribe for free on iTunes or follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Next Reel. And if you're the kind of person who walks around with a flashlight in one hand just so you can accentuate your shadows, then you're also the kind of person who should head over to Instagram.com/thenextreel and play The Next Reel's Instagram #PonyPrize, #GuessTheMovie Challenge. Andy, how'd we do against the cunning detectives this week?
It was a pretty good week. It was some great 70s images from Escape from the Planet of the Apes. I love the series. This one is I don't know if I could call it a guilty pleasure, but because I think it may be, I don't know what the Rotten Tomato reading is on Escape from the Planet of the Apes, but I sure love it. But it had some great just 70s images that were really throwing people in all sorts of different directions. But third image, though, JoJo Lee 23 was able to figure it out. And she hadn't won in a while, as she points out. But yeah, she took it on this one and now is entered to win the 2015 Pony Prize.
Outstanding, Joe Jolie. Congratulations. This was the one with Roddy McDowell. What's his...
Well, they're all with Roddy McDowell.
They're all with Roddy McDowell.
Ricardo Montalban.
Ricardo Montalban, that's right. The young Ricardo Montalban.
Right, he runs the circus.
Yes, that was the one. 78%. Audience score 53.
There you go.
Meh.
Critics
I like this. I did like this one.
Critics like volunteers better.
It's time, Andy. Let's do some trailers.
So, Pete.
Yeah, Andy?
How do you feel about chess?
Oh, I do like me some chess.
I like me some chess. I can't say I'm a very good player. I think I'm just a little too impatient to really sit down and have a good long old game of chess. But I do find chess a very interesting game. I find it to be just such an interestingly designed game with so much strategy involved. And it's so interesting, in fact, that so few films get made about it. Because, I mean, I guess it's not that interesting to watch. But I did really enjoy Searching for Bobby Fischer. And this new movie that's coming out in September, Pawn Sacrifice, about Bobby Fischer, looks really interesting. I am quite excited. And I think the things that actually make me the most excited, I mean, it's got a cast that I think looks interesting. Tobey Maguire as Bobby Fischer. Peter Sarsgaard is in it, and Liev Schreiber is in it as one of the Russians that Boris goes up against to play. Michael Stuhlbarg is in it. It's got a great cast, but what excites me the most is that Stephen Knight, who we have talked about as liking quite a bit on our show before, he is one of the three guys who came up with the story, and he wrote the screenplay for this. So that, to me, just right away tags this as something that is now on my must-see list for the year. Edward Zwick is directing it. I know he's one of your faves, and I think he's done some good stuff too. But for a biopic, I think it looks really interesting. And not having really known anything about Bobby Fischer except for like the whole Searching for Bobby Fischer angle, where he kind of disappeared from public life and all that, this really intrigued me because I got a glimpse as kind of the insane genius that was behind this chess player and how he portrayed himself and his battle against the Russians and everything.
We're at war. It's a war of perception.
Bobby!
The poor kid from Brooklyn against the whole Soviet Empire.
You don't look well, Robert James.
Looks very interesting. I am quite looking forward to seeing this one.
I am too. It's one of those where even though I know how it ended, I'm still interested to see how they get there. And I'm also with you on chess movies. I really like chess movies, and it is sad that I cannot think of more chess movies that I actually because I find myself, whenever I watch movies about chess and that are well-made movies about the bout, they're like great boxing movies. I just love that feeling. So I'm looking forward to this one. I think Liev Schreiber looks really good. As Spassky, I think he looks great, and
he's a perfect Russian.
He is a perfect Russian, really perfect Russian. And Tobey Maguire, of course, I'm very excited to see him on screen again. This looks like a great role for him.
Yeah, absolutely. This is going to be hitting theaters. It looks like a limited release initially, but hitting theaters in September 18th.
Excellent. My film, Youth. Written and directed by Paolo Sorrentino with Michael Caine and Harvey Keitel. It's a story of old friends vacationing in the Alps, figuring out how to live with being old. Caine plays this composer, a retired composer. Keitel plays a director. And this is, I think, yet another film that catalogs what you and I will be like in a scarce few decades.
Indeed.
I have seen only 2 other films from Sorrentino, both of which I quite liked. This Must Be the Place with Sean Penn as the old rock and roller, and The Great Beauty, which I did not like as much when I first saw it, but when I saw it again pretty recently, I found it just stunningly beautiful. I thought it was a really, really wonderfully shot film, and was very excited about it. So I think Youth looks really interesting. It also stars the beautiful and talented Rachel Weisz, Paul Dano, Jane Fonda. It looks like a really great cast on a film that that addresses some issues that I've been thinking about as I went to the dentist this week.
Did you take a piss today?
4 drops. You?
The same, more or less.
More or less?
Less.
God, you guys have got a strange friendship.
Strange? The good friendship, you only tell each other the good thing.
It looks really interesting. It reminds me of that trailer we talked about a little while ago of it was a foreign film, 2 older friends who went and hung out in Iceland or Greenland or something, which
yes,
it really looks intriguing. And it looks like a nice film for these 2 guys to be in. And I like the feel of it. It just has a great sensibility. And I definitely am looking forward to this one too.
This one hits. It actually has no U.S. release date, but it is. Its first big screening is May 20th at Cannes, and it opens. So it opens simultaneously in Italy and France on May 20th, and then I'm assuming we'll get it someday. But it's one that's worth keeping an eye on. It looks like a sweet movie. I don't like crooks, and if I did like them, I wouldn't like crooks that are stool pigeons. And if I did like crooks that are stool pigeons, I still wouldn't like you.
What happens if it isn't Philo Vance? I beg your pardon? Who said that? I haven't seen you since you solved the Kennel murder case. How are you? Well, for the love of... Nick Charles, what are you doing up there? Impersonating a book cover? Shh. I'm working on a case. Don't tell me you've gone back to detective work. I thought you had turned respectable. Didn't you get married? Oh, didn't I? Vance, I married a girl in a million. I heard it was a girl with a million. Well, same thing. I've become a California gentleman. I never heard of such a thing. What are you doing here in New York? Well, it seems that Clark Gable is making some personal appearances here, which interests my wife. And there's a very good bar at the Ritz, which is all right with me. So we popped into town to play. But would you believe it? Before you could say Metro Goldwyn Mayer, I stepped right into the middle of a baffling murder mystery, and they put me to work. Well, you poor fellow, you have my deepest sympathy. I can use it. Believe me, Vance, this case is a toughie. It all revolves about a tall, thin man. I was standing at the bar of the Ritz one day, reaching for an olive, when a very pretty girl suddenly popped up in front of me and said,
Hello there.
Hello. Another glass. How are you?
You know, we do know each other.
Certainly, we've known each other for years.
Aren't you Nick Charles?
Huh?
You don't remember me. I'm Dorothy Wynant.
How is your father?
Oh, that's what I came to ask you. He's disappeared. Chris, what are you going to do?
That's what I said I'd do.
Chris, you wouldn't do that.
Don't automatically...
Nicky, put Asta in here with me tonight.
Oh, yeah?
Nice missing. I'll look for it in your back.
It's about Julia Wolfe.
Did you kill her?
Gilbert!
Well, why not? You had a perfectly good motive.
How'd you like to have a couple of little murderers for your children?
And maybe I haven't been on a merry-go-round since that day. Are you, anywhere near a solution? Between you and me, I think so. I got all the suspects together at a dinner party. And then I pulled a fast one. I told them, and the murderer is right here in this room tonight. He's sitting here at this table. Are you sure that the murderer is one of that group? Not absolutely. But I know where to find out. Where? Right in there. Now you watch me. I'm going to dissolve slowly into this book. And if you'll stand by, I'll give you the answer.
The Thin Man, 1934. This is the first film of, I think, what it ended up being, a series of six, not even really a series, but it's 6 films chronicling the investigations of Nick and Norah Charles. This one was based on the Dashiell Hammett book of the same name. And I think it was actually this was the only book that was based on it was about Nick and Norah Charles. Because then he died, I guess, right?
Dashiell Hammett?
Yeah. Is that right? Am I making things up? It's possible I'm making things up.
It's possible. I don't know. I didn't look as much into Dashiell Hammett, but Well,
I'm going to correct myself on that later if I in fact was wrong.
Okay.
Yeah, but these are really iconic characters, husband and wife, detective, sort of a team, a pair, and really, really fun to see William Powell and Myrna on screen together. I feel like we should talk just a bit about the trailer, because I let it run. It's a funny trailer, and we just heard most of it. I didn't cut very much of it, but I had to actually research because it offers some... it offers another character of the time that I did not know about.
Right, Philo Vance.
Philo Vance.
Right.
Did you know much of this Philo Vance?
I didn't until I started digging up on old William Powell.
Yes. So this is a conversation between the trailer's a conversation between Nick Charles and Philo Vance, and Nick Charles is on the cover of a giant display of a book. And they're talking to one another, and Philo Vance is another fictional character who was in a series of crime novels by S.S. Van Deen. Looks like the pen name of Willard Huntington Wright between the 20s and 30s, and so Vance was a really, really popular character in books and movies and radio, and was the character that sort of introduced us to this new character of Nick Charles in the trailer. And I thought that was kind of an interesting way to do it, even if it doesn't really hold up over the decades.
Well, and what you should mention is that both of those characters on screen were portrayed by William Powell.
Yes, well, you're right. I should say that.
Right, that would make more sense.
I am shamed. It is funny because when you listen to it, I think it's really fun to listen to, but it really is this guy talking to himself.
Right.
Which is why it will sound like the guy talking to himself. So, same guy.
Very funny.
So that's Philo Vance. And but the trailer is another one of those kind of 30s trailers that we've talked about that I do love. They're very quaint. Where they take the actor out and they break the fourth wall of the film, and they don't just show clips of the film and great big music, but they really talk about the film, and I find that immensely amusing.
Absolutely. I will, jumping back to Dashiell Hammett, it looks like it was his last novel that he wrote, but then afterward, because of the success of it, he ended up writing the next 2 screenplays after The Thin Man. Well, not the next 2, but after The Thin Man and Shadow of the Thin Man. He wrote those 2 screenplays.
Okay. He just didn't write any more books. He
didn't write any more novels about the Thin Man. He did have, it looks like he did have some short fiction. He had one, I don't know if it's related, but it's called A Man Called Thin in 1961, and then The First Thin Man. So, I mean...
So you'd say the author part of him died. He became the screenwriter. So what I told you was true.
That's right.
From a certain point of view.
Whoa. Obi-Wan.
Man, I just Obi-Wan all over you.
You sure did. I felt it.
Don't ever say that again. Don't ever say that again. Okay, so The Thin Man, 1934. How'd this hold up for you?
I do enjoy this film. It's a very different sort of film to watch if you're not really walking in knowing what to expect. I had heard about the Thin Man series. We have talked about the Thin Man series several times on a show because we have talked about the couple, Nick and Norah Charles, both when we did Nick and Norah's Infinite Playlist and when we did Murder by Death. That just the couple of this, the pairing of this couple came up in both of those conversations. And I absolutely adore watching this couple on screen. I think they are so much fun. I did find a little thing here. It says, the films revolutionized the screen portrayal of marriage, previously earnest, virtuous, and staid, invigorating it with youth, irreverence, and sex appeal. I definitely agree with that. I have so much fun watching this couple on screen. And I think when I first watched this film, I watched it looking for kind of the mystery part of the story, and I really felt it lacking because it's really, there's just not much to the actual mystery that Nick is trying to solve in this particular story. However, the second time I watched it, I did find it a little more enjoyable because I did find it more about the characters and just more about this relationship of this couple, and the case really seems just kind of like a side product of kind of, that's why we're here, but we're really here to just enjoy ourselves with Nick and Norah Charles. I wouldn't put it like on one of my favorites or anything like that, but I do find myself enjoying it just really because of the chemistry.
I am right with you, and I love that comment about marriage. I think that's a really, I don't think we can underscore that enough because, up until this point, the relationships that were the most fun in movies, the most sort of frivolous and frolicking and full of innuendo, they were all the relationships between, scoundrels and just not married people. They were between people who the whole rule was once you get married, the relationship really went south.
Right.
And this was a film that really celebrated the fun and frivolity of marriage. It's also a film that, it portrays that sort of innuendo and so much drinking and, this, particularly that sequence in the beginning, as she sits down and says, how many martinis has he had? Well, this is his sixth. Well, I would like 5 more lined up right in a row here. Showing a woman drinking so much is something that they snuck in before the Hays Code was, went into sort of full steam of censorship. This was a film that got away with a lot more, and in fact, it was as it was reined in subsequent films. You end up seeing things like, they have a Nick Jr. They have a child, and the drinking stops. He has to stop drinking, and it ends up being, I think, neutered in that respect. And this film really showcases so much of that fun. That I think makes the film so much better. I think you're right. The mystery is introduced early on and then becomes just sort of a side project that is A, not as interesting, B, much more confusing as we lead up to the final climactic sequence at the dinner table that is just, it's one of those just sort of thrown in to try to wrap up loose ends. I didn't really get a sense of accomplishment that I had helped solve anything as an audience member.
Right. I think that's exactly how these films are designed. And not having read the book, I can't speak to that. But it does sound like, from what I've read about it, it sounds like the book was a pretty close adaptation to the book, with a few changes. Nick Charles was a much more overweight, out-of-shape character. Here, William Powell is very tall and slender, so much so that even though The Thin Man title refers to to Wynant, the man who disappears in this film that Nick is trying to track down, everybody started assuming that The Thin Man actually referred to Nick Charles. And so it ended up, as the series continued, it ended up becoming something that they would just name it and kind of allude to the fact that it was Nick Charles, that it wasn't actually having anything to do with Wynant. So interesting. That was one interesting little change that ended up kind of affecting really the whole concept of what the title was even about. But yeah.
Particularly because, have you seen the other movies?
I haven't.
And that's something I was wondering about as I was researching these, because I also have not. But the whole conceit of the film is that the Thin Man refers to Wynant. We see him in, what would you say, the first 15 minutes, I think, of the film. And then he disappears. Yeah. And that's the mystery ensues. Where did this guy go? He's gone for months. There's money being exchanged, but where's the money going, et cetera, et cetera. And so the caper is that he was murdered, and they find him in a fat man's suit. Right. They find his bones in a fat man's suit. And that's the trick, that it wasn't a fat man, it was a thin man in a fat man's suit. So that's the whole thing. The Thin Man refers to a very specific character in a very specific movie. How do they handle that when the rest of the movies about skinny people? Like, right. is that a conceit they keep up? So I don't know about that, but I think it's a funny name for a series.
It is. We'll get to jump into it again, because pretty soon we're going to be talking about another one of these Thin Man movies.
That's right.
Yeah.
So okay, it's this whole series that we're doing here, though. Since we have agreed that the story of the Thin Man itself is middling to fair, the reason we're talking about this film is because of cinematographer James Wong Howe.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about James Wong Howe.
Let's do it.
All right. James Wong Howe is what a funny character.
Yeah.
This guy. Discovered by Cecil B. DeMille, I believe, as an amusing young Asian man with a cigar in his mouth.
Right. And he I was going to say, and he really was kind of one of those guys who came to Hollywood right in the early days. I mean, he was born on August 28th, 1899 in China. His family moved them to Washington, I believe.
Pasco.
Pasco, Washington, and where his dad was like a shopkeeper. And interestingly, I mean, his name, James Wong Howe, was actually given to him by one of his teachers. His first teacher actually refused to teach him, and then so the other teacher, she taught him, but she said his name was too complicated to say, so she said, "I'll just call you James Wong Howe. That'll be easier." I think his
dad's name, I think, is Wong Howe.
Yeah, and I think he's Jin Wong Tung, I think is his name.
Yeah.
So anyway, so once he got a little older, he became fascinated with the business. He moved to Hollywood, and he was just doing all sorts of odd jobs. I mean, he worked as a bellboy. He worked as I think when he finally started working on productions, he was like, sweeping up cut films in the labs and things like that. But yeah, he finally got to a place where Cecil B. DeMille did notice him, and he kind of started stepping up from that point.
What I love so much about James Wong Howe's path is, first of all, he stayed in Oregon for a while on his way south, and, Oregon boy, he must be quality.
There you go.
But he also was first a still photographer, and his first camera came to him from that very store in Pasco, and he just fell in love with photography, and obviously that's sort of close to my heart too, and so when he got to Hollywood, he made his living by doing promotional stills for actors and actresses, and on this, on the type of film that he was shooting, it was very difficult to make, and I'm sure you actually would be able to talk more about this, was to make blue and green look like rich natural colors. They were blue blind, and so actresses with blue eyes would have these bright white eyes and would look all washed out. And so he started shooting them by having them stare into a giant piece of black felt.
Right.
And that caused their eyes, their eyes to come in as a much darker, richer color. And that's what got him his first job as a director of photography, was an actress that said, "I want him shooting my movie."
Right. Because she wanted somebody who knew how to shoot her to make her look beautiful.
Right.
Yeah. Very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, he was somebody who started early on. A lot of these cinematographers in the early days were very focused on trying to bring about all these new techniques, because everything was being developed at the time. And we've talked about Jack Cardiff and things that he brought to the table. James Wong Howe was he liked his low-key lighting. He liked some dramatic lighting, deeper shadows. We definitely, a lot of this film feels very, very kind of stagey, very kind of Hollywood. But you do get some particularly when Nick starts kind of exploring, you get some beautifully dramatic lighting that really, I think, as we get into the last half of the film, there's some just dark stuff that's going on that I really enjoyed looking at. And that's something that Howe really liked to do. He also was somebody who had developed some deep focus where he would have actors spread pretty widely apart on screen, foreground and background, and everything would be in focus. And this was something that he started doing in 1931, 10 years before everybody credits Greg Toland with it in Citizen Kane. And but I think that he was doing it in a way where he didn't feel like it needed to stand out so much. He just did it because he felt it was part of the story. That's something that was very critical to him, was that everyone's job was to be subservient to the story, and he wanted to make sure that the things that he did didn't necessarily stand out so much. Now, Greg Toland, Orson Welles, those are people who really wanted to make mark with Citizen Kane, and I think that stuff definitely stands out in that film. The way that it was staged works really well in context of that film. And maybe that's why Greg Toland got so much more credit for that than James Wong Howe. But James Wong Howe definitely was kind of involved in that deep focus beforehand.
That deep focus is hard to do.
It is. You need a lot of light.
You need a lot of light, and a very, very, very tiny aperture on the camera. And to do so in an era where film stock was just not that sensitive, it proves really complicated achievement to be able to do that. And to do it, and as one of his sort of technical contributions to the field, to do it and not be sort of credited to it, because, again, it was such a part of the gestalt of the film, of the storytelling of the film. I think he deserves more credit than he has gotten for it. I think this goes to one of his greatest contributions, which is to raise the level of awareness of the importance of camera, of cinematography, not just as a guy who does it, but as a guy who openly and actively advocated for the role as a key, central leg of the filmmaking stool, working directly with the director, not as just a kind of a dumb camera, as somebody to push the buttons.
Yeah, and he was definitely somebody who really did that. And listening or reading some interviews that people who had worked with him, where they are interviewed, he definitely comes across as somebody who is a little bit of a jerk on set. He comes across as a guy who is very much, he knew exactly what he wanted. He clearly was very smart and knew how to paint the image, but he didn't like it when people would question him. He wanted it the way that he wanted it because that's how it was supposed to be. And even the people who asked him questions about, why are you doing it this way? Like, I think there was one interview where one of his assistants asked him, why are you, what is the source for that light? And James Wong Howe looked at him and said, don't you ever question my source. That source is my source. And but then the guy looked at the film when it was done, and he said, oh, I can see exactly what he was doing here. It looked perfect, and I shouldn't have questioned him. And everybody says he was really nice offset, but on set they felt that he was just he kind of had a little bit of a god complex, and they attribute some of that to the fact that he was a minority in this business, and really, and he was very short, and he just felt like somebody who could easily have been looked over, and so it was almost like he was fighting to make sure that they remembered that he was an integral part to it, which stands to what you were just saying about him wanting to be one of those people who's like, I am a critical part of this project.
Yeah, even his own sort of writing in response to some of these critics, I think belies sort of, his feeling of being on the team of filmmakers who make a film. He says there are many studio workers behind the scenes whose contributions toward the excellence of a motion picture never receive the credit because outsiders have no way of discovering where one leaves off and another begins. And I think that is so, so true. hundreds and hundreds, sometimes thousands of people go into making a film. In this era, definitely hundreds of people making a film, and it's so easy to sit by and criticize when you have no idea how the inner workings sort of brought the film together. And I think he was a loud advocate for that.
Absolutely, yes, he was.
To your point on The Thin Man, the second half of the film is much more dynamic and interesting to look at than the first. It's like the film changes tone as soon as he, Nick Charles, jumps into the investigation and sort of takes the mantle of the investigator. Up until that point, he was a retired investigator. He was living off of the money of his spouse, and really enjoying the high life. And there are some really funny sequences that lead up to that, particularly this holiday party where all of the people that he had caught and then had been released from prison come to join him at a party. And there are just it's a wonderful place to see kind of how Nick and Norah interact with one another. But in general, it introduces us to some really funny characters and the landscape of the film. It's a touch out of place in this sort of mystery, but I find it really appealing.
Well, and what's great about that scene is, his wife's reaction to all of that. Oh, you know such interesting people.
Yeah, I love you because you're interesting friends.
You're right.
Yeah, truly, it is a real showcase. The guy with no teeth, the guy crying in the corner. And then of course, not to put too fine a point on it, but right at the end, after we've been introduced to all of these fantastically, comedic thugs, sort of reformed convicts, who all seem to really get along with him well. They introduce two reporters who come into the party, and sort of the contradiction, or I should say the transposition of reporters, and the media in this room full of convicts and thugs. I think the sentiment that I walk away with is that really Van Dyke believes they belong right in the same place. They belong in that world together, and I thought that was a really nice touch.
Yes, they're all just mingling in there, enjoying their Christmas party.
but again, nothing really, and same thing at the party where we're introduced to Nick and Norah, where Wynant's daughter introduces herself in the funny little exchange. There's nothing really dramatic looking about these sequences.
There isn't. Although I was watching it the second time, more just focused on the camera work, camera position, and everything, and I do feel like he knew how to move the camera, and placing the camera. The very first shot we have in the film is this askew angle, kind of a Dutch angle, looking up on a wall of this shadow of a kind of a mad scientist almost, before it pans down to reveal Wynant working in his on one of his experiments. That was a really interesting shot. When we cut to the story and we introduce Nick Charles, this is after Wynant's story has kind of ended. We fade out as we see his shadow rescinding to the into the darkness. We fade up in this Christmas party, and the camera's on a boom, and it just comes, it's like right under the piano, which is a very interesting placement. As we see under the piano, we see all the people dancing. The piano's up on a stage, so we kind of still see everybody's heads as they're dancing in the background, and then the camera booms up over everybody to reveal this big party before it comes and finds Dorothy, Wynant's daughter, and her fiancé as they're dancing here. And then, of course, the camera continues pushing past them all the way up to the bar, where we finally get to meet Nick Charles in his glory as he is coaching the bartender on how to properly shake a martini.
Yes, which was, I think, another one of those great little Nick Charles moments that I thought was really wonderful. But once he takes on that mantle, they have this walk outside, and they manage to Norah put Norah in a cab and send her off, and then things get dark.
Yes.
And so, almost to your point, I think the set really determined the sort of interesting visuals, right? Because you're right, the film opens on a really great, stark kind of define the stereotype shot of the shadow on the wall, kind of moving as he's playing with this. Like, who knows what the heck that thing does? Like, what was that invention?
Right.
Just 6 light bulbs on a bar, and he's moving it back and forth. It makes funny noises. But we get this great sense of mystery around the Thin Man, around Wynand himself. We don't know what he's up to. We don't know if is he some sort of a criminal? Is he a con? There's some mystery. We never find out what that's all about. All we know is that he was looking for some bonds that he thought his former assistant had stolen, and wanted that money back. And it turns out he was kind of a dark guy. He definitely was capable of. The film alludes to the fact that he was capable of doing some pretty diabolical things.
Yeah, right.
But then he disappears. The film changes tone until we get back into that sequence when Nick goes into the basement and we get some really cool, very minimal lighting sort of setup, very stark contrast, single light on the desk to really highlight how dark everything else is in this workshop. I thought it was just fantastic, including Howe's placement of character in the frame. Mm-hmm. He's walking down this long hall, and he's just little tiny in the corner with such beautiful negative space in the rest of the frame. I just was blown away by some of these visuals.
Yeah, it's really gorgeous. I mean, I think it works really well in context of what the film is trying to do. And I think that speaks to what Howe said about everyone's job is to be subservient to the story. It is a very light story. It's a light detective caper. It is really about the relationship of this couple. And to that point, it has a great look for what they're doing here. It does dabble in some of the darkness for that element of the story, and when you're in those scenes, it's beautiful, dark cinematography. But even when it comes back to the dinner scene, it just kind of reverts to that very, kind of regular sort of Hollywood-looking setup. But in context of the story, again, it works for what they needed to do.
What's fascinating about that is you look at the sort of compare this film to, let's say, Seven. Mm-hmm. Right?
Quite a comparison.
Right? That is also a mystery. It's a heck of a mystery.
Yeah.
What you get with Seven is a film in which I really never get a sense that the visual tone of the film changes from scene to scene, whether we're sitting at dinner with 3 main characters, trying to see how Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman are interacting with one another. That film or that sequence is as dark and sort of jarringly visually, tonally strange as what's in the box out in the middle of the desert. And I think that's credit to Darius Kanji, but I wonder, I don't know. I wonder how we got to that point. You know what I mean? Where there is a visual style of the film, and it's pervasive throughout every sequence, versus The Thin Man, which shows us, I think, a really interesting contrast of styles throughout the film.
Well, it some of it does feel just, maybe it's because it has that stage shoot sensibility with it. Right. This feels like every scene, even the streets of New York, all feel very much like this was all shot on the Hollywood backlot. It was all controlled. Everything was controlled. And I know that Howe liked working in these environments, but we also have to remember this was earlier in his career. I mean, he still, by this point in 1934, had a good number of films under his belt and certainly could control what he was doing with his productions. But I think that in this particular case, I think it was still early enough on in everybody's career in the film that they were just making something that did still fit with the look that was so prevalent in studio productions at the time. Mm-hmm.
And we're going to see more as we sort of move through other films in his career. We'll see how he sort of evolves too.
Exactly.
Man, that guy had a lot of stuff. 140 credits.
Yeah, 140 credits. He directed a couple films. He did, TV commercials, documentaries. He directed a TV series. He won 2 Oscars. I mean, very busy guy.
Let's, do you have anything else to say about him, or shall we talk a little bit about other folks involved in the film?
Yeah, let's jump over to the rest of the folks.
How about Van Dyke?
Yeah, interesting director who came on to do this film. He had just done a film beforehand, and I'm blanking on the name of it right now. I think it was Manhattan Melodrama, and he worked with Powell in that, and then he had read this book, and Myrna Loy. He'd worked with the two of them, and he saw this relationship between the two of them developing off screen, where they just had the same sensibilities, the same comedic timing, the way that they related to each other worked really well. And he had just read The Thin Man, and he's just like, "Oh, I want to make this, and these guys would be perfect in the film," and so he wanted to cast them in the film. And I think that he's an interesting director who. I think he kind of also, along with Howe, was brought up in the early days of the film business. He was worked as an assistant director with D.W. Griffith back on Birth of a Nation and Intolerance, and slowly moved over to directing in 1917. The Land of Long Shadows was his first film, and then like so many people in that era, he directed 5 more films that year. So,
the days of contract players.
That's right. But I guess he was a really fast director. They called him One Take Woody. So he was a very quick. He knew what he wanted. He got what he wanted and moved right on. And then he got an Oscar nomination actually for this film, for The Thin Man. And then he also was somebody who acted, I believe, in stuff, didn't he?
I don't know. I was busy looking at his credits as a director and seeing the change when he started being known as Major W.S. Van Dyke II.
Oh, interesting.
Starting right around 1941, and right at the end, like he wanted to be credited as Major Van Dyke, and I was trying to figure out why. Why did he want to be Major Van Dyke? The other interesting thing about him is, and to your point, that he was very, very fast. He was really sought after in that era specifically because he was fast, because he saved the studio so much money. And in this sort of era of contract player, there wasn't, when you could churn out as many films as you possibly could, as efficiently as you possibly could, that was really one of those key sought after skills, to be able to do it pretty well.
Yeah.
So, interesting character.
Well, and he's also somebody who was known to, he let his actors ad-lib some of their lines, just kind of play around with it a little bit. And that is something that worked really well when working with William Powell and Myrna Loy, because they did kind of have that banter and go back and forth. And so they say that some of the lines that were in these, in the Thin Man series, he directed, I believe, the first 4 of them, were just things that they came up with on set.
Good stuff from Van Dyke.
Here you go, Pete. He was promoted to Major prior to World War II. Patriotic Van Dyke set up a Marine Corps recruiting center in his MGM office. He was one of the first Hollywood bigwigs to advocate early U.S. involvement, and he convinced stars like Clark Gable, James Stewart, Robert Taylor, and Nelson Eddy to become involved in the war effort.
There you go.
Now you know.
Now you know. Smarter every day. Okay. Let's talk about William Powell and Myrna Loy then a little bit.
Yeah, what a pair.
They're such a pair.
Yeah.
What fun they are on screen.
And they were in 14 films together.
Wow.
I wonder if that's the most any pairing have been in films at any point. Do you know anyone else? Can you think of anyone else who's been in that many films together?
I don't. I really don't.
That's a lot.
I don't. They're just an iconic movie couple. In terms of volume of films.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah,
that's crazy. 14 films.
Yeah, these 6 plus a whole slew of other ones. So both before and after. I really like him in this film. He was nominated for Best Actor for this film. I think he brought a lot to the table in this fun role. He's somebody who started out as a villain in a lot of films, and I think it was only right around this time that people started putting him into more comedic sorts of films. In fact, I think, was it Libeled Lady that came out just before this one, that was awfully funny. It was a very funny film. That came out actually just after this, but it's a very funny film. That would be a fun one to talk about one of these days.
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen many of William Powell's films. I've seen My Man Godfrey. I've seen The Great Ziegfeld, and I think that's it. And The Thin Man, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
What else would I have seen?
I don't know. Did you see Mr. Roberts?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one
either. Should that be on my list of shame? Have you seen it?
I haven't, but it's one that we both probably should see. It was his last film, and it was, a lot of great people in that one. Henry Fonda, James Cagney, Jack Lemmon. It looks like it's one of those films that everybody should probably see. But he was in a lot of stuff, and I think you're right. Like, looking at his body of work, there aren't that many I have seen either. But there is something about him that is just eminently watchable. He commands the screen when he's on it. I think he just knows how to hold a moment. He can have those great expressions on his face. I think it's just so much fun to just watch him in this film. He just really is great.
It's so funny because it was leading up to, and this is back to this Philo Vance. I mean, he was in 5 as Philo Vance. He was in 5 Philo Vance movies between 1929 and 1933, and you sort of get that Harrison Ford syndrome, right? You think, I get why Harrison Ford might have thought twice about joining Indiana Jones,
right,
after playing Han Solo in as many movies as he did, and I think we get that here too. Like, you wonder. That's an awfully quick turnaround to go from one successful series to another. Although I think arguably this, given that we hadn't heard of Philo Vance up to this point, probably Nick Charles was the better play.
Right, exactly. Interesting to know about William Powell. He had worked with Jean Harlow several times, and they fell in love, and I believe they got engaged right before she ended up dying. She died of uremia at the age of 26 before they could marry, and then that along with his cancer diagnosis slowed down his acting career for a little while. It was really, I think, in the 40s that he slowed down quite a bit because of that, while he was kind of getting himself over her death and his cancer before he really started jumping back in much harder with his film work again.
And he still did 15 films in the 40s.
I think he took a nice long retirement because he died of heart failure at the age of 91. In 1984.
How about Myrna Loy?
Myrna Loy was a full-blooded American. She was born in Montana, but
full-blooded, like a pedigree.
That's right. That's right. But interestingly, in the early days of her career, people cast her as foreigners all the time. Like, there's something about her look that is unique enough that people ended up casting her as gypsies or all these different foreigners, she was opposite, was it Lon Chaney in an early film? I can't remember now, but she was this foreign kind of witch in one of his Fu Manchu movies, I think. And so she was, it took a little while, I think, for her to kind of be seen as a leading lady. And then once she kind of hit that rise to stardom right in the early 30s, paired with this film, I think that really helped her kind of get out there and just get into all sorts of other things.
I don't think I've seen any other Myrna Loy films. I'm going through her list of credits. I can't see one that I have seen. Except, well, obviously The Great Ziegfeld that also had William Powell in it.
And likewise, I haven't seen much more from her, except I think she was also in Libeled Lady. So that would be my other film that I'd seen her in. But yeah, I love her in this. And interesting.
Oh, she's terrific.
She and Clark Gable, I guess, in the early days of their career, when they would do anything to act, they were both extras. And if you look in the original silent Ben-Hur that was made in the 20s, she is actually an extra. You'd never be able to find her. They let in like thousands of people to be extras in like the big scenes, and so she's in there somewhere. With
That's
Clark
awesome.
Gable. Yeah, pretty funny.
That is really funny. She was terrific in this film. They make a wonderful couple, and that for me is what makes it worth the price of admission for this film.
Absolutely.
Just watching Nick and Norah.
Yep.
Who else stands out to you? I got one.
Oh, okay. Maureen O'Sullivan pops in. It's nice to see her in one of her early film roles. It was shortly after this, I think, that maybe not shortly after this, but she ended up being in a lot of the Tarzan movies with Johnny Weissmuller.
She was adorable, truly, in this film.
Yeah, she's great.
I think the most fun character for me, every time he was on screen, I just was delighted, was I think he was sort of the MacGuffin, I think, of the film, was Gilbert, Dorothy's brother.
Yes.
He was a student of, played by William Henry. He was a student of psychology and was all about murder and mayhem, and was always asking, "Can I see a body?" Or really, really dark, very dark character. And I, obviously he was in there so that we would be, I think, led to believe he was the bad guy. Spoiler, he wasn't. But he was sure fun to watch, make every single scene super uncomfortable.
It's funny. I never thought that they were trying to make him seem like the bad guy.
You didn't?
No, because he's just
so obvious.
He's so goofy. He's so he was just the really strange one, and I thought that was hilarious. I had so much fun watching him because he was just such an odd duck. He's definitely one to remember for sure.
Truly, he's been in a whole bunch of stuff. This William Henry, 229 credits to his name. Started as a child actor, and ended up having a healthy career.
Thought it was interesting that Cesar Romero pops in there very briefly as Chris, the new husband for Wynant's ex-wife.
Yeah, I couldn't make sense of his character at all.
I couldn't either. It was a very I couldn't figure out where they were going with that, trying to say that because it seemed like Wynant's family was well off, but then he seemed to be just a mess of a man, like the type of person that Nick Charles would have gotten out of prison.
Yes.
So I couldn't quite figure out where that was going, but it was just funny to see Cesar Romero popping in long before he started working as the Joker on the old Batman TV show, which is, I think, the only thing I really remember him from. So it was funny to kind of see the early days of him. And then I was going to mention Harold Huber, which I think is he's an interesting actor. He's got a great face. He's he was the one that clearly seems like the one that they're pinning as the guilty one, even though he does get killed, and that kind of ends that right away. But he's got a great face, and he's got that scar on his cheek, which I guess was from in his youth he had an amateur fencing match and got a nice gash on his face that led to that wonderful bad guy look that he had so well.
We didn't talk about Porter Hall.
Oh, yes.
Shows up as Macaulay, the lawyer, right?
Right. Yeah.
This was one of his first films, and he was older in this film. In 1934, he was born in 1888, and so he was older when he came to it. But he was a fascinating character. Ended up moving on to play, not so many kind of. And in fact, he ends up being the bad guy, which is funny because he ends up being bad guys an awful lot.
Well, he was the thing that I love him in is Miracle on 34th Street. He's the guy who administers the psychological tests to his Macy employees.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But he also had a rich career from the 30s through the 50s when he passed away in 53. Anything else you want to talk about this film as we get down to wrapping it up here?
I don't think so. I mean, it did get nominated for Best Picture. Like we said, it did receive a few Oscar nominations. It lost its Oscar to It Happened One Night, another film we've talked about on the show, in 1934. So We love that film, and I would say that was a better choice than this one. I mean, I do enjoy this film, but It Happened One Night is just one that I feel is a much stronger film.
Yeah, I agree. Although I had a hysterically good time watching this movie.
Oh yeah.
It certainly didn't crack my top. I don't even think it cracked my top 100.
No, but
on my own personal flick chart.
It does make me want to watch the rest of the series because I did have such a wonderful time just getting to know this couple. They are so much fun on screen together.
How did it do in terms of numbers? Were you able to find anything?
I found a few numbers, not a whole lot, but it did. It did okay for itself. I mean, obviously, it was very popular enough to spur on this whole series, and people just loved Nick and Norah Charles. But from what I found, this film cost about $226,408 to make, which in today's dollars is about $4 million. So, it's a decent budget, especially for a studio film. I'm sure that was fine. I couldn't find anything specifically domestic, but what I did find was just a worldwide gross of $1.4 million internationally. So adjusted, that was about close to $25 million. So, it succeeded. It did pretty well for itself. Made about $224,000 per finished minute.
Not bad. Certainly got itself some sequels.
Yes, it did.
Let's rank it.
Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel and check out our stack rankings. And let's see if this is going to crack, I don't know, what do you think, top 50? I doubt it.
Yeah, I do too. But let's see if it gets into the top half. That's what.
All right, let's
90 or so. All right, okay. The Thin Man or Mad Max? I think we're both going to say Mad Max. Yeah, Mad Max. The Thin Man or Taxi Driver?
Huh. Well, I think you're going to say Taxi Driver.
I am actually going to say Thin Man. As much as I love Taxi Driver, it is a harder film to watch. Thin Man is a breeze to watch.
Boy, that's the truth. Yeah, I also definitely say Thin Man.
Thin Man or Field of Dreams? And here I will go Field of Dreams. Baseball.
Are you really, really solidly Field of Dreams?
100%. If for nothing else than James Earl Jones's fantastic speech at the end.
Okay, I'll give you that.
The Thin Man or Run Lola Run?
I would say Run Lola Run.
I would too. The Thin Man or Splash? I would say Splash.
I would say Thin Man.
Okay, I'll give you Thin Man just because it's a classic and it spurred all those wonderful sequels, and Splash spurred a terrible sequel. The Thin Man, speaking of guilty pleasures earlier, or The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai? I will do Thin Man.
I'll do Thin Man.
All right. Thin Man or Gallipoli? I haven't seen that one pop up in a while. But I think I'll do Thin Man.
I will do Thin Man too.
The Thin Man or The Poseidon Adventure?
I will do Thin Man.
I'm a little conflicted on this one, so I'll just go with you on this one.
I'm conflicted, so I give up.
I quit. All right, that puts us at 129 out of 186. So it didn't crack the top half, but you know what? We've talked about a lot of movies we like.
A lot of good movies.
I'm okay with that.
All right. Where do we go from here in our exploration of James Wong Howe?
We're going to be jumping forward a few years, and we're going to be talking about the film King's Row.
King's Row.
1942. This is one that I have not seen before, so I'm going to be jumping in blind on this one.
I can't remember if I've seen this one. There are a lot of King movies.
The IMDb...
Nope, I haven't seen this. This is Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, IMDb says, the dark side and hypocrisy of provincial American life is seen through the eyes of 5 children as they grow to adulthood at the turn of the century.
Yep, I haven't seen it. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, it'll be fun to jump into one that neither of us have seen yet.
Absolutely.
We'll see if it's a movie we like.
Here's hoping. Until then, I got to go to bed.
All right, man. I'm going to go have 6 martinis, I think.
All right, I'm
going to start in the middle of the road with a 3-star from Roberto Franigi. Roberto. He says, The Thin Man had the advantage of being based on a successful book by Dashiell Hammett, who had himself been a private eye. The audience did not bother about who murdered the butler with a sliver of ice in the locked library. They were asked to be interested in what was happening now, why it was happening, and sometimes how it was happening. They could be just as concerned with the byplay between Detective Nick Charles and his wife Norah as in wondering who did the murders. For most of the film, in fact, the audience is led to believe that Wynant, the missing inventor, is the murderer. Only toward the end does Nick show that Wynant has been dead a long time and someone else is doing the killing. Another factor which made The Thin Man notable was that Nick and Norah were, well, almost real people. Rich they might be, hard drinkers they certainly were. They were a married couple in the film, and they actually managed to appear to enjoy it, making gentle fun of one another in every scene they played. The Thin Man pointed the way with such success that 5 follow-ups were made, culminating in Song of the Thin Man in 1947. Most of the Thin Man films are predictable, but they were historically important for introducing sophistication and witty repartee into the private eye film. Their biggest asset was that they were escapist pictures made for a depression-weary audience. The Thin Man pictures took the audience away from grim reality simply by ignoring it. A middling review, but I think it captures my sense really very well.
And something that they bring up that we didn't really talk about, but I mean, Prohibition had just ended, and there was an awful lot of drinking in this film.
Awful lot of drinking. They were really reveling in it.
Yes. Well, I've got a 1-star. In fact, the only real 1-star review over on Amazon. Powell, okay. Myrna, stay at home and shut up. This is by Arthur Van Pelt, quote, history buff. Arthur says, talky and phony chemistry. I am amazed that folks buy into the idea that a special chemistry existed between Powell and Loy. I find their, quote, banter mostly boring, insipid, artificial, and thoroughly phony. Bad scripting combined with 2 actors who act as if they couldn't care less about each other. Why Nick Charles doesn't strangle his irritating film wife remains the biggest mystery in this film. Powell on the case provides the only redeeming feature and the only scenes that I pay attention to. When nagging Myrna Loy shows up, I'm off to the fridge. Boy, is she a pest.
Wow. I like her.
Haters gotta hate.
Wow. Amazon.
Andy, it is hard to believe that we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
You are telling me. Producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Just visit thenextreel.com/originals. Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
I love The Next Reel Season 4. Do you know why?
I don't. Why?
Because we got to talk about my favorite movie, Terry Gilliam's Brazil.
That's not even an adaptation.
No, but it was such a great part of our great Terry Gilliam series, and a few others in that series were adaptations, like The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, adapted from Raspi's stories, and La Jetée, which inspired 12 Monkeys.
Oh, right. And for our Man with No Name trilogy, we saw how Sergio Leone's A Fistful of Dollars was basically stolen from Kurosawa's Yojimbo.
We added Labor Day to our Jason Reitman series, adapted from Joyce Maynard's novel.
Oof, there's one we'll always regret.
Our big Stephen King series covered adaptations like The Shining, Cujo, Christine, and Stand By Me, great horror and coming-of-age tales.
Another Coen Brothers adaptation, too. We got to talk about how they turned Homer's The Odyssey into Oh, Brother, Where Art Thou?
For our holiday series, we did The Bishop's Wife and The Poseidon Adventure.
And who could forget seeing Alec Guinness in the adaptation of Kind Hearts and Coronets during our series dedicated to him.
We really need to do more of his films.
Truly.
We had our first film noir series with classics like Double Indemnity, Detour, and Out of the Past.
And our black and white cinematography of James Wong Howe series with The Thin Man, Sweet Smell of Success, Seconds, and King's Row. So many adaptations.
Oh, you're not kidding. Dive deeper into these originals and more at thenextreel.com/originals. Every book you buy helps support our show.
Get the full list at thenextreel.com/originals and start reading today.